I'm talking today with Andrew Lidne of Juncture Media, and
Hello,
hey, thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
of course.
So we're gonna talk about Avaria Versus, which you guys have got on Kickstarter right now. So the first thing I'll have you do is a pitch Avaria Versus to anybody
Sure.
watching this that has not heard about this game. What is it, and why should they be interested?
Well, Avaria Versus is what we think is the very first party versus party turn-based competitive game. So that's the technical jargon. But basically, it's like if you could take your Final Fantasy party and fight it against your friend's Final Fantasy party. That was something that we always wanted to make since we were little, and nobody made it. So here we are trying to make it.
Yeah. You mentioned the Final Fantasy thing, which I mean, as soon as I saw this game for the first time around PAX East earlier last year, um, and that's immediately what I thought. I was like, oh, okay, this looks like competitive Final Fantasy, which is a cool
Yeah.
idea. Um, how much of that nostalgia for that era of gaming, that type of gaming, the JRPGs of those years, like has influenced you or has brought you to this?
I mean, it's 100% that, it's playing my first Final Fantasy all the way through playing my 10th Final Fantasy and just really falling in love with that genre. And then from a gamer perspective, this was before I decided to make a game. I was just seeing that style of game kind of slowly disappear. Each Final Fantasy became less and less like the last one,
Yeah.
which I understand. I understand. They have a body of work. In my opinion, if you want to play the old Final Fantasies, go play the old Final Fantasies. They're
Right.
still there. I understand why they had to evolve and make something new, and I respect that. But it wasn't the game that I wanted to play. I just wanted them to keep pumping out more of those. So
Sure.
it's really that nostalgia and thinking back to those fond memories, and everything is really what inspired us to do this.
Cool. So that is what initially grabbed my attention. You know, this idea of a competitive JRPG party-based combat. Um, and then I started seeing things that made me even more interested. One of which being the number of combos of potential party you can have. So I think you've said it. There's over 2,000 combos of the four
Yeah,
classes and the 16 heroes, all their
yeah,
different skills and ability. Um, Whenever I talk to a developer about competitive games,
mhm.
uh, I always bring up balance because I think that's
Yep,
something a lot of people are really interested in knowing. How, is there going to be one class that's going to just ruin everything for everybody else if
yeah.
they don't use it? That seems like a lot of combos. How are you guys approaching balancing all that?
Well, first off, we know that there will be something that the community will discover that we had no idea or we hadn't thought about. So first, let me just say, you guys will probably break it within like 5 minutes of it being out. But that said, so when you construct your party, you can only choose one from each of the four classes. Okay, so you can't double up any class in your party. That's one like top level macro balance. Then the heroes, there's 16 heroes, so there's four from each class, right? So we can balance up and down that way and make sure that within the mana soldier class, for example, that they all kind of have relatively equal power. Because we actually, there's 40 abilities per class if you
Mm-hmm.
count their level up states, because they are actually different abilities. Sometimes they add different effects, and so even though it's the same ability getting to level 2 or level 3, they're all different, but we assigned them all power values. They're arbitrary power values that we, came up with as game designers, but we make sure that each hero also has relative power. So on paper, things should be pretty balanced. How it's going to happen in real life, that's what we're looking to our closed beta to find out. That's where I'm going to be, talking to our Discord guys and being like, okay, like who's winning all the time, and
Right.
looking at our analytics and just trying to figure out then. So I think right now it's on paper, and then once we have more playtest data, we'll be able to get more surgical about it.
Right on. Yeah. So if people don't know, so you did your alpha this past summer, correct?
It was
And
a
you,
closed alpha, yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah, and then this Kickstarter is kind of leading into the beta period for this
Yes.
game. Which no doubt, as you're saying, people are gonna kick the tires, break a few
Yes.
things, but that's
I hope.
that's how it goes.
Yeah.
one of the other things that I really was impressed by,
Uh-huh.
cat cameo.
This is
Okay.
Odin, my one-eyed cat. That's
Ooh,
our
I
most
want
recent adoption. We've got three cats now.
cool.
Hey, Odin. He interrupted,
He's
so
a
sorry.
he's a cat. He don't
Yeah.
care. Um, one of the things that really grabbed my attention, kind of a little bit separate from like the gameplay and the lore and all this stuff, was the radial menus that you guys are using. And I love when games really have a good take on UI, and I think the radial menus that you have kind of permeated through the entire game are really slick and really smooth.
Oh, thanks.
But I'm wondering if that was kind of where it started. Did you always have this idea of using radial menus, or is that
That
something
was
that's evolved?
that was literally the first thing we programmed. What was the menu? Was starting there. So that the idea literally did come from that because I always remembered playing the old Final Fantasies. It would almost felt like a fighting game to me at one point, where I would remember like Ultima is, down 2x, over 2, then down like 15, or
Right.
like three page downs, and then 2 arrows down, and then X, right? So I was like, that's cool, right? Now, that's how those games are meant to be played. That's the way they were built. But I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do that and to make it feel snappier and cooler and to make it feel like, wow, I just know if I know where my moves are, I can play this so fast and
Right.
so trying to upgrade that. But yeah, that was literally the first thing we started with is like we got to prototype this menu.
That's pretty cool that it started that early. The other thing that I was kind of wondering about, from the perspective of Avaria, in how early it came about, is the lore that you're building, which really kind of struck me as being pretty unique in the realm of like fantasy sci-fi, where emotions have this certain power. And there'll be a link to the Kickstarter below in the notes, and I encourage anybody that's at all interested by some of the clips they're seeing in this to go check that out, because it's a really cool concept where all this magical power comes from emotions. Where did this idea come from, and how early did it start in development?
Well, the story was the first thing that I started doing before when I was just by myself
Mm,
and just the very initial start of the thing. And I mean, I think the idea for the emotions thing came from, I mean, honestly, I don't know how it popped into my head, but I know I was like doing a writing session. I was listening to Nine Inch Nails and like just kind of zoning out. And for some reason, I'd already kind of created that the Eonis were going to be born of the planet and immortal and these kind of pure earth creatures, right? And so then I'm like, there's got to be the opposite. They're like they're basically Vulcan in the sense that how
mm-hmm.
logical they are and just very cold, right? And that
Right.
kind of vibe. So I was like, what's the exact opposite of that? And then I'm like, basically, in our world, a human, somebody who's like kind of pleasure seeking and emotionally driven and whatever. And so when I realized that was kind of the separation between these two, I figured that also had to be the catalyst for change, from an Eoni becoming a Hume, So
Yeah.
that's kind of where that came from.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how that story evolves, and the lore we'll get snippets of in this game. It's got me really excited, especially from like the first little bits of the single player kind of campaign that have been shown at the shows we've met at. Um, you, the hook's in. You've enticed
Good.
me.
Well, yeah,
Um,
that is one. There's one thing I want to mention too. At one point, we wanted to ship the story and verses together. So, you might see old things of us talking about how, Avaria versus is going to have these two modes. Um, about 6 months ago, we decided to go with PvP separately and ship it by itself first because we really want to dial in the battle system. And with PvP being out and us getting that data and working with players and fine tuning that stuff, I think PvE is going to be that much better
hmm,
when we really dive into the battle system. And we've done a ton of work on PvE. Like we were working on them side by side for 2 years. And then basically 6 months ago, we were like, okay, no, let's focus 100% on versus and take that to the finish line. And that's where we are right now. So our hope is to follow up as quickly as we can with our PvE campaign called Ghost of the Immortal. and that we want to come out as quickly as we can after putting out Versus.
That's super smart and keeps people engaged with the product too. Um, let's move from talking about Avaria versus the
Hmm.
game, talk about you as a developer.
Sure.
So what was it that got you kind of started on the road towards independent game development?
Um, I was in music my whole life, and at one point I had started attending, just like I was trying to go to cool things in New York, and was like I should be doing stuff with my evenings instead of going home and just playing video games, which
Sure.
is it's great, but living in New York City, you got to take advantage of it. So I joined a group that was a game developers group, and this was when I was running a small label in Brooklyn. So I was had nothing to do with games. I actually at this point in time, there was no thought in my mind that I would ever actually make a game. And through going to this group, which is now called Playcrafting, which anybody in New York, Boston, and I think they have San Francisco now too. Anybody in those communities has to go look up Playcrafting and just go to everything that they do because they're awesome. Um, they I was sitting there watching people make games week after week after week, and then one day I was just like, "Hey, I think I want to do this," And so it was just literally kind of being and seeing all these people, watching their prototypes, you know, go through different phases and showing, sharing them with everybody and play testing them. I was like, it just seemed possible for the first time.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm not a coder, so I'm like, what is the value that I can bring to a game team? It's not coding, right? So what can I do? Well, I can create the IP, I can design the game, I can produce it, I can hopefully find talented people and get everybody to work together, and maybe I can help raise some money. Those are the things that I can do, right?
Hmm.
So I did those things first. I took about 2 years to create the story and do all the initial game design, which has since evolved a ton,
Sure.
obviously. But the core stuff. There's going to be 4 classes. These are the roles for the classes. This is the way the radio menu is going to work. All that like top level stuff.
Right. Yeah. Cool. You kind of already touched on one of the questions I make sure I ask everybody, which is the inspiration um, that you had in gaming, which you mentioned, that a lot of this game is built on the nostalgia of those JRPGs. But what are some
Yeah.
of the other games that people might not connect as kind of an inspiration for Avaria versus?
Well, I did some. I'm going online right now because I really thought about this
Yeah.
when it came time to do this project. And I can actually send you a link after this, but I made sort of a little blog of GIFs of all my most influential games. And I mean, some of the random ones that, I mean, like for example, like FTL, Faster Than Light,
Mm.
like that's a huge influence for me in this game. In a lot of ways. I don't know if it'd be directly apparent, but people might see it. There's another game called Frozen Synapse, which
Yeah.
was a which was like kind of like a Rainbow Six style, kind of like plot out your like SWAT team sort of game. And that really got me realizing how cool async multiplayer can be,
Mm.
right? So, I always thought of async multiplayer as like chess or like Words of Friends, and then when I saw that, I was like, wow, you can make a really badass game that doesn't require like full-time networking, which once again, not being a developer, I'm like, if we can cut this out of our game, that's going to just save us time, right? Async is easy. And so those games, and then honestly, there was one Final Fantasy that particularly sparked me on this was they did a re-release of Tactics, Final Fantasy
Yeah.
Tactics on the PSP, and I think it was called War of the Lions. And so when they did the remake, they added these ad hoc modes where not only you could co-op with your buddy, but I think you could battle each other. I think you could straight up battle each other. We would use it to grind our characters up because the funny thing is that you could go into these battles and and you could just whack away at each other and just like you keep all the XP when you left. So that also taught me that we couldn't have anything like that in Avaria Versus. Like there's no way to grind. Everybody has the same toolkit. You can't buy anything that makes you better, even remotely better than anybody else. It's just all the pieces are there, and how you decide to do them is use them is how it's going to work. But I'm going to send you this link too. You can see a few other ones that maybe you'll.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll put some footage up of these different inspirations. And finally, we always ask indie developers, um, what other indie games out there now have caught your eye? What other
Cool.
indie games out there, or indie projects, indie
Yeah.
dev teams are doing something that you think as a developer is really cool?
Well, as other devs will be able to relate to, whenever you're at a show, you know, you don't get to play anybody else's games. I mean, if you have friends and stuff, that a lot of people that roll with you to the conventions, like, you can have a minute to like go around, but
Sure.
a lot of times you don't get to play a lot. But that being said, there's a whole New York scene of developers that we're really kind of pulling together, and there's really cool stuff being done by a lot of guys there. There's a team called Computer Lunch that is putting out a mobile game called Mama Hawk, and it's really fun, and it's really funny and fun to play. There's Simple Machine is out of New York too. They're doing cool mobile stuff. They have a game called Pop the Lock that a lot of people may have played. Um, and then there's another buddy of ours in Dumbo that is putting out a cool game that is called Kung Fu Kickball, and he just started working on it, and he brought it to MagFest, and he won an award for best multiplayer. I think runner up. And it's cool, you're little kung fu guys, and you gotta it's 2v2, and it's just this arena, and you gotta kick the ball into the other net. This is the best game that I'm really excited about is Sam. He goes by Snow Hydra online. He's our lead developer at AVARIAvs, and he's putting out his game very soon called Zarvot, and it's going to come out on Nintendo Switch. And that won best multiplayer at MagFest, where we were just at a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And super fun. It's like a party battler. You got free for all with 4 players, and you're these little cubes, and you have all these different abilities, and it's super fun. It was drawing a big crowd the whole time at MagFest.
Awesome. Well, there's some great suggestions for other games for people to check out. Um, so your Kickstarter is currently live. As I said, there'll be a link below. Going through February 15th. So if anything that you've heard here has you excited about AVARIAvs, or you want to learn more, head there. And if you like what you see, maybe consider chipping in. Andrew Lidne, thank you for taking some time out of what I'm sure is a very busy week to talk to us a little bit about the background of AVARIAvs and some of the design concepts.
Of course, yeah. Thanks so much for calling me, and we'd love to hear anybody's comments on the Kickstarter. Hit us up, let us know what you think, and join us on Discord if you want to chat. So thanks.